So, what if building artificial intelligence without regulations in place isn't really innovation, but just lazy tech? Today on InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles, we are joined by Dr. Gemma Galdon-Clavell, founder and CEO of Ethicas.ai, Ethicas.ai, and she's one of Europe's leading experts on algorithmic auditing. She is here to dismantle the Silicon Valley narrative that regulation kills progress. And, well, she holds nothing back. To set the stage, just listen to how Gemma defines the current AI landscape. First, on the illusion of AI success, then on tech billionaires fighting regulation, and finally, she uses a brilliant analogy. Anyone can build a plane, but will it fly? Yeah. If you are an EU project coordinator and or a deep tech founder or an investor, Gemma's words lead us to the ultimate question for your next EU proposal. Are you wasting millions funding raw AI that will eventually collapse under real-world complexity? Or are you investing in data layer or algorithmic auditing that guarantees true digital sovereignty? So this episode is brought to you by my new book, Transition Science in the Economy. In it, I use data from more than 180 countries and 150,000 observations to show how 5 global transitions are collapsing the middle class and rewriting prosperity and power. So the digital, the green, the new globalization, the transition to a war economy, and the housing crisis. If you want a clear map of today's economic chaos and how to navigate it, search for Transition Science in the Economy on Amazon and get your copy. So let's go straight into my conversation with Dr. Gemma Galdon-Clavell. We discuss why foundation models are just raw gold, why Europe shouldn't try to copy the US and China, and how to turn AI compliance from a legal burden into a hardware engineering advantage. Engineering advantage. Here's the interview. Okay, we're on. Okay, so welcome back to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. Today's guest is Dr. Gemma Galdon-Clavell. I'm not sure. She's the founder and CEO of Ethicas.ai. She's one of Europe's leading voices on things like algorithmic accountability, AI auditing, ethical AI governance. Actually, her work has helped shape the debate on what really means to build AI systems nowadays. AI systems that are powerful, but also AI systems that are trustworthy, accountable, socially robust. Now, this matters far beyond the tech world. For researchers, innovators, policymakers, public institutions, EU-funded projects. For all these people, the question is not whether we are going to use AI. The question is whether that use will be transparent, fair, and resilient. That's why this conversation matters. So thank you very much, Gemma, for being here. I hope you don't mind me calling you Gemma.
No, of course not. Thank you so much, Fernando.
Thank you for accepting to take this time. And I would ask you to start at the foundation. When people hear terms like ethical AI or algorithmic accountability, they often think about broad principles or abstract debates. In your view, what do these ideas really mean in practice?
Right. So maybe for most people, the best we can do is compare AI to other technologies and innovations of the past. Think about how there was a time when new vaccines were tested on poor children and women. There was a time where you could buy heroin in pharmacies because there was no system to control what got to pharmacies. There was a time when you would enter a building and the building could collapse on you because there was no standards or regulation on how to build. So with AI, we're kind of in that process. We just kind of discovered this new world of advanced technologies, and it's taking us some time to catch up in ways that sometimes are unjustifiable, I must say. I think the democracies are very good at protecting people, and we should have been better at protecting people of some of the negative consequences and harms of these technologies, just like we do with everything else. And so when we talk about the need for ethics in AI, we're talking about this. How can we make sure that AI is like any other industry that can thrive, but also make sure that it's not harmful? And all innovation is potentially fantastic and potentially harmful. Like, if I do chemotherapy and I'm healthy, chemotherapy will harm me, but when used with people that need it, chemotherapy can save your life. And that applies again to everything. Right now, we have more controls for a baby stroller or a toy than we do for AI systems that are targeting young people, also adults, but young people, and using sometimes mechanisms to create addiction or to have negative impacts on our attention spans, on how we relate to others. All those things, I feel we should have been a lot better at foreseeing and building guarantees to ensure that whoever is developing those systems understands that risks need to be studied and mitigated against. And so my work auditing AI systems is basically doing that work, going into a system and trying to understand how is that system failing or potentially failing, and what are the mechanisms that we can incorporate to make sure that that is not the case, or that we minimize the risk of people being harmed or negatively impacted by an AI system.
Well, I believe that the bad work that you're saying that our societies are doing in protecting us in this area of AI started with the social networks. It didn't protect us equally from all the problems the social networks brought, and all those platforms brought upon, especially upon our youth. But tell me, you talked about auditing an AI or auditing an algorithm. When you first moved into this field, what problem were you trying to solve? And what does a serious algorithmic audit tell?
That's a great question. Let me split it in two. So first, how did I get into this space? So when I started working on this, I wrote my PhD on technology and technology policy, and basically about trying to solve this problem of the now it's AI exceptionalism. Back then, when I did my PhD a long time ago, 15 years ago, it was tech exceptionalism. And the problem we had back then was it was the beginning of social media. And there was this idea that we could use social media and social information online to better predict things. And so I used to work a lot with police to understand, can we use Twitter data, or can we use geolocalization of people's mobile phones to better do emergency services. And very early on, I realized that there was a lot of promise that didn't hold into reality. All those systems were promising that through general surveillance of people, we'd be able to cater to people's needs in a better way. And what I found in my work and through collaboration with these policing and security entities was that oftentimes the reality was a lot more messy, that these systems were often failed, that the error rates were were greater than it was usually accepted. And so that therefore the incorporation of all these new data into emergency systems was very, very problematic. And that oftentimes it resulted on resources and people being wasted on things that didn't add any value, while the things that we knew were tested and proven to save people in cases of emergency had less people, because people and resources had been deployed for the promise of these new data saving the world. And so when I started to work on my field, it was like a very niche field that no one really cared about. But then basically it became like it left that small security and safety space to enter everyone's lives. I mean, we carry in our pocket systems that have more power than the systems that I worked on 15 years ago.
Mhm,
So
yeah.
there's been a massive change, but the problems have surprisingly been very consistent. Like, we continue to hype the promises of these systems and underestimate how the way that these systems interact with reality is a lot more messy than what some tech bro imagined in their, investor deck. And so I work especially in that messy middle. Like, you have the technological innovation that I'm a huge fan of. Like, I feel that AI is the achievement of all of us. It's a lot of funding and a lot of bright minds working to innovate that has taken us here. But just like with any other innovation, we need to use it well and understand the constraints that it has. And so what happens when those tech systems hit the complexity of actual reality, and the fact that the data is not always good or clean, and that the predictions that we make are not always good predictions, that these AI systems can be flawed in ways that we don't easily anticipate. And so when we audit, we are doing exactly this. Kind of oftentimes we reverse engineer those systems to see what is happening, how are they working. And so we work both with ADMs, what we call ADMs, that's like the traditional predictive systems that are used to hire people or to make decisions, like more basic actuarial systems, but also LLMs and generative AI that creates images and words and speech, and the AI that we manage and that we are kind of overwhelmed but also fascinated by today. And so what we do from a very practical level, if it's an LLM, we take actual conversations between LLMs and people, and we build systems that automatically detect when something may be going off, where we may be identifying a harmful interaction or an instance of misinformation. And so we use our own AI to identify AI issues at scale. It's an AI that is heavily developed with humans and works with humans. It's not just human oversight. Like, we are constantly using these tools as tools, and so they have no autonomy, but they allow us to look at data at scale. And so we are able to identify risks like confidentiality leaks. Is an LLM or any AI system leaking personal information or information that a company doesn't want to see out there, like IP issues. We can also audit for reliability. Is there misinformation, hallucination, any other kind of dynamics in the data that we would not want to see. We can also audit for security and misuse. Like, we recently audited a system used by students in a school setting, and we found that 8% of the interactions of students were adversarial. That was 8% of the times students were trying to actively break the system or use it for things that it was not designed to do. And that will always happen. What was relevant here is that we identified that the provider was able to successfully identify those 8% of interactions and safely redirect. And so these are the things. A lot of people say we do this, or we are constantly monitoring. We are making sure that there's no negative interactions or harmful interactions. But then when we audit, we're like, actually, there's this percentage that you missed. And so we are like an independent party that comes in with a really like a high technical understanding, but also a high social understanding of the dynamics in children and students, for instance. And by combining those two things, we can actually say, yes, this system works well, because even though some things happen every once in a while, these are safe, these are immediately identified and safely redirected. We can also look at issues of bias and fairness in those systems, not only whether they use language that is more male than female, but also are specific attributes of people seeing different things. And we've seen that sometimes in social media, like that women see comments that men don't see. And so our experience of content, it's completely different. So these are all things that we can independently validate and verify. And that's what an audit is. And for us, what's really important is that the whole world seems to be auditing at the foundation model layer. Everyone's focused on the models. Our work is very much on the outputs and the impacts. We work on auditing real life, like this collusion of the system and actual people. So even with ADMs, when we work in HR, we're not just looking at whether the prioritization of candidates was fair and good, but we're also looking at who was actually hired and for how long they stayed in at the company. So in the end, we can tell you, you're better off by using these AI systems, or actually you made better decisions beforehand.
You mentioned very interesting points, but one that stuck with me, because I think it's important to say that if you want to have controls over these tools, that doesn't mean you don't use them, you don't support them, you don't want them. There are people, however, that would say different, that would think differently, like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk, or what they call the long-termism. You've got to remove all guardrails, all kind of restrictions to promote innovation. Any less than that is trying to stop innovation. How do you feel about that?
I think that's such a lame argument. And I'm sorry, because these people are regarded as highly intelligent. I dare
I agree
question
with you.
this because, like as I said, like every innovation has negative consequences, and we accept that. Like you and I, Fernando, you and I were both sitting on a chair, right?
Yeah.
The chair that we are sitting on right now, the chair that everyone who's listening to this podcast is sitting on, has had to prove that it can hold the weight of a human. And no one in the chair making industry is like, oh my God, that is bureaucratic red tape. I shouldn't have to prove. I mean, of course you have to prove that you can do what you're claiming to be able to do. And if these people claim we can build connection, they need to make sure that they build connection without individual or collective harm. And again, we ask that from all industries. Like the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, is not it's not regarded as a charity industry. Everyone realizes that
Mhm.
in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a
Far
lot
from
of
that.
money that is being made, a lot of practices that many people are not happy about, a lot of claims of them not being ethical in how they set prices. But even the pharmaceutical industry would never dream of saying, oh, our medicines and our vaccines should not go through clinical trials. They understand that when they're testing their systems with real humans, they're actually improving the product. And I think that Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and everyone who says that regulation goes against innovation is not realizing that there's no innovation without regulation, without understanding how to minimize harm. And I would dare say, I think that they're promoting a lazy innovation that
Mm.
is harming us all, but it's also harming really good engineers and really good innovators that are trying to do things well. A very clear example for me is like, listen, I could probably build a plane that was not able to defy gravity. Like if I don't have to defy gravity,
Mhm.
just send me the pieces, I will put them together, I'll have a plane. The real challenge in innovation is not to build a plane, but to defy gravity. That is the limitation that you have. That is your main challenge as an innovator. With social media and AI tools, your gravity is individual and collective harm. If you are not able to tackle this, you do not have a product. You have something that works, just like my plane could probably,
Mhm.
move around
Yeah.
an airport, but it would not fly. A plane is defined by its ability to defy gravity. New AI tools should be defined by their ability to provide services and give us tools in ways that don't harm us as individuals or society. And again, that is not a special request. We require this from every other industry, profitable capitalist industry around us. Every single industry understands that there is the limitation of harm. And don't call it regulation, call it insurance. Many of our clients are not concerned about compliance. They're concerned about risk. They want to make sure that the systems that they use are not risky so that they don't have liability. And so we audit for them, not because they want to comply, but because they want to minimize risk. So if these people, if Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Sam Altman and whoever more want to sell unsafe products that don't always work, then that is a problem that we are telling them that it's okay to hit the market with something that doesn't work. And again, it's like us, approving baby formula that sometimes it's toxic, or approving the construction of buildings that don't use materials that we know are resistant enough. We would not dream of being able to do that. And I think that we all take a lot of pride in democratic societies being able to protect us in that way, that, I don't have to suffer when I'm walking down the street that a balcony is going to fall off on my head. If I go to the pharmacy, I know that whatever I'm being sold is safe for me to use. How come we don't have that relationship with AI? I honestly feel that they are killing the main innovation of our time because they refuse to take into account that gravity, that risk, that harm are important, and that there are limits to how they build, there are constraints to how they build, and that's what makes innovation exciting.
Yeah.
Building without constraints, it's easy, it's lazy.
Yeah.
Building with constraints is where real innovation lays.
I believe Peter Thiel in these days doesn't call it regulation. I think he calls it the Antichrist. It came to
Yes.
that point, but let me move away from these guys and ask you about the role of Europe, because the European Union sees itself very often as the regulation champion. Where do you think Europe is genuinely at? Is the AI Act an advantage, or is it the Antichrist slowing down innovation?
I think that the EU has really good intentions, but is really bad at actually building alternatives. I feel that when it comes to a discourse or even passing a law like the AI Act or GDPR was also a fascinating break in the global narrative around privacy. But Europe has not been able to protect privacy and is not being able to protect people from harm in the AI era. I think that when it comes to actually building alternatives, Europe and we've studied this, like we've looked at where public funding goes in the European space, and what we have found is that Europe ends up funding imitations of Silicon Valley. We are
Yeah.
not really innovating, but we are trying to do the same thing. And now there's talks about a Euro stack. That makes no sense to me. I think that in a globalized world, we need to understand where we can add value. And I think that Europe needs to understand that that value is in that responsibility layer. Like, I think that Europe has a massive potential to specialize in insurance for AI, in protections, in guardrails, like showing the world how we can take the innovation from the US and China, these LLMs and foundation models that have lots of problems. We can use them as a service, and then we can build value and protections onto them. And then basically, I often use the image of gold. Like, gold, when it comes out from the mine, has very little value.
Yeah.
You need to manufacture it. Like, you need to turn it into a piece and channel it to investment or to jewelry and the value lays in this manufacturing on top. That's what makes it valuable. I think the same thing happens with AI. A lot of the innovation that we are seeing in the US and China especially, it's what I would call like raw innovation, and the value. And that's what we're seeing data that says that 98% of AI pilots fail in enterprises. 98%. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's, there's the challenge, the real challenge is in making that in theory valuable material, the gold or the LLM, useful in a specific context and valuable in a specific context. That layer, which includes auditing, but also tailoring, making sure that an LLM works in specific medical environments or education environments, that these systems understand the specific context, that they have the guardrails. That's where the value is. And that's what companies want to buy. They want better AI. And right now, no one's providing this. And instead of focusing on this and funding companies and initiatives that are focusing on this manufacturing kind of, added value layer, Europe is going to just copy the LLMs and building LLMs that will never be able to compete in terms of investment and access to data to the ones that China and the US are using. So why don't we see that as the cheap resource? Let them take the gold, and then can we make it valuable? And so I think that Europe is missing a huge opportunity there by not understanding the real supply chain of AI and not understanding what it can bring that value. Having said that, I'm a massive fan, and as a European living in the US, it makes me really sad when I hear that Europe may be questioning their ability to regulate. Like, I think that just sending that message at the global level that people matter and that governments exist to protect people, and that therefore we need regulation, and we can discuss whether the regulation is good or not good, but just that message that regulation is needed, I think it really resonates with a lot of people. I'm really proud that Europe is playing that role.
I'll come back to that, but let me go back to what you said about this idea of the Euro stack. That was in large part, sorry, in large part a reaction to that feeling of maybe one day we cannot use the Chinese tools, the American tools because they are spying on us, or they'll be switch off if we get Trump too mad at us. Don't you think that how do you call it, sovereignty, European sovereignty, is an important issue here, or are we just misdirecting our efforts?
Oh no, I think that sovereignty is really, really important. What it's really important to understand is where sovereignty lays. And I don't think it lays in foundation models. I think
Mhm.
that foundation models are becoming a service, like a
Okay.
commodity, something that we
Okay.
can use and build on top of. And so I think it's in Europe's interest that more countries are able to develop this. I think it's great news for Europe that China has their own LLMs, because then it's highly unlikely that we will not be able to access those LLMs from the US and China, and hopefully from other countries where they may come. But if they are commodities, then we don't need to reproduce that. We need to build on them. And
Mhm.
again, I think that there's enough open source LLMs out there right now that I do not think that our sovereignty is challenged by us not having those foundation models. And I feel that what we need to control are the layers on top of that, where the value lays, where the personal data comes in. Like, again, don't forget, these foundation models are just like the initial building block of value. And I think that now we are beginning to see how there's a big path from this foundation model to actual company or actual value to the economy or to enterprises or companies. So I think they're understanding that relationship, that complex supply chain, and understanding where do we need our own things and where we don't, where we are better off by promoting global competition around that would make a lot more sense, and not just us trying to control the whole thing. Also, I would say we need to think long term,
Mhm.
and I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that everything points to the government changing in the US, either changing or going fully authoritarian. But there's a high chance that the dynamics of the U.S. government are going to change in 6 months with the midterms. So like there's things pointing that this kind of parent challenge or threat to globalization is going to be short-lived. And so, I think that we need to understand all of these dynamics and understand where our stack falls into that and what our value lays. And I think that if we build that, that would not always allow us to not only allow us to be sovereign, but also to be a provider to the
Mhm.
rest of the world. So I think there's a lot more value in this complex understanding, and again, not just trying to copy and have everything in house, because like, and just let's be very honest, it has failed. Like, Europe has been pouring money into building our own foundation models, and none of them compete
Yeah.
with what OpenAI or DeepSeek are able to do today, or Anthropic.
Okay, let me get back to Europe, please, and ask you this. You talked about GPDR. Um, Imagine that Ms. von der Leyen calls you tomorrow and asks you, can you come here and fix GPDR? What would you say? It's unfixable, or do you see a way to
Oh, it
make it
is it
work?
is it is fixable. The main problem that Europe has is enforcement. And so I think we would need to see what are the pieces of GDPR that need to be enforced. And again, some pieces in GDPR I would forget about because they don't add any value. But there are pieces there that can and should be enforced. Europe has not been able to do that due to a combination of reasons. Of course, there are lobbies pressuring and not wanting that kind of enforcement. But there's also been a a long-term inability to build the technical or the socio-technical staffing and methods that are needed to do this work. I think that Europe has often kind of relied on third parties like standardization bodies to do the hard work, and I think that we need to do it ourselves. And there's good initiatives, like there's the European Center for Algorithmic Transparency, which is about the implementation of the DSA, but they have very small budgets, and they have not been able to build an ability to enforce on a regular basis. And we have that for DSA. We have the EDPB for the the EDPS for GDPR, but the article that talks about AI, for instance, is grossly underused. Like no privacy experts are getting into AI, even though Article 22 of GDPR mentions automated decision making. So I think that we have the legal basis that we need to do a lot better. We just need to be strategic about where do we enforce these regulations in ways that promote good innovation, the innovation that is willing to tackle the hard challenges, the innovation that wants the plane to defy gravity and not just to move around the parking site at the airport. But I think that there's a lack of understanding of what the challenges are in Europe right now, and that is very concerning.
Okay. So let me ask you a different question, or the same thing in a different way. Imagine you are writing a proposal for an Horizon project, an EU project. What would be the first questions that you need to address before starting to write it? First question is related to AI systems.
So that's what we continue to do that, even though now we've expanded in the US. We have a lot of clients in the private sector to audit, but we continue to do R&D in Europe with Horizon Europe, and it's actually Horizon Europe has been crucial to our growth and to our ability to sandbox ideas and test things. And so when we get a lot of requests to be. In the past, we were like the ethics partner. Now that it's changing, we are the responsible AI partner or the auditing partner in those projects. And basically, what we do is we work with those technical teams that don't have an understanding of the regulation or of social harms or the technologies that can be built to improve privacy and to minimize AI harms, and we work with them to build those. And so we help them understand what an audit would mean and what they need to have ready. What are the technical tools that they need to develop inside the system to be able to understand risk before it becomes a problem for their systems. We are developing certification methods so that those that are actually spend specific time in making sure that their Horizon Europe project is paying attention to impact, to social impact, to harms, and to ethics. How can they prove that additional effort? So we have. I think like we have 12 Horizon Europe projects going on at any given time. We submit around 30 proposals every year, and that's all word of mouth. Like it's just people that come to us because they've known us from other projects. So what I would tell them is like you need to understand that in Europe you cannot develop AI unless you take this seriously. And taking it seriously is not just doing a compliance, not just having a lawyer at the end of the process that says, read all these manuals. I think that's one of the mistakes that we have made. We've reduced compliance to being about documents. Compliance needs to be about the technology. Again, I often use examples of other fields. Like, if you're checking the safety of a plane, you're not just looking at reports. You're actually looking at, where did the screw go in the wing to make sure that the plane could fly. Like compliance in many other fields gets very, very technical, and I think that's an inheritance that we have from the past, that it's not helping us. And so we make that effort of making compliance technical, so the engineers in our projects don't need to understand about law. We turn that into specific technical requirements, and we make sure that the specifications already include the steps that need to be taken for that technology to understand risk, to mitigate and minimize risk, and then to be able to be presented to society as a piece of innovation that is actually doing all the things that innovation is supposed to do, which is to move the state of the art forward, but also make sure that we protect people in the process.
Well, I don't want to abuse your time, so let me ask you a final question. Just looking ahead, and are you optimistic, pessimistic about the direction that AI is taking? What message would you like to leave as a final message for researchers, innovators, project leaders?
Oh, there's this great saying that says, you can have pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. That's what I have. Like when I look around myself, especially, I live in the US. Things are not okay here. So it's hard sometimes to find reasons to be optimistic. But I continue to be optimistic, and I see a lot of people trying to make a difference. I see a lot of people in the technical field, a lot of engineers that really care about these issues and are trying to innovate in different ways, often with a lot less budget, with less opportunities to grow and to fundraise. But there are still saying, I do not want to develop another system for people to buy shoes. I actually want to use my engineering skills to build systems that save people's lives, that make people's lives better. So I think there's a lot of people that are working for a change of paradigm, so to speak. And I think that Horizon Europe is an amazing space for the European Commission to make sure that we have a space to channel all that energy that goes into building an alternative understanding of what AI innovation is.
Gemma, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here. And I hope that our audience enjoys it. And if they have questions, we can channel them to you, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. Of course, not at all. Thank you, Fernando.
Okay, thank you. Now that you have heard the full conversation, let me step back. If you have been following this season of InnovEU, what Gemma just described should feel like the final piece of a big Lego. I hope Lego doesn't mind me using the brand. Her diagnosis aligns perfectly with the greatest minds we've had on the show. Gemma told us that 98% of enterprise AI pilots fail because they apply raw innovation without context. Does that sound familiar? If you saw it, it's exactly what Luke Julia, the creator of Siri, told us in episode 7. 95% of AI proofs of concept are thrown away because they bring zero ROI. Gemma warned us against the lazy innovation of tech billionaires who want to build without the gravity of regulation. Well, that connects directly to Brando Benifei in episode 4, who proved that regulation isn't what's holding Europe back. Fragmentation and lack of data access are. And as we learned from Cory Doctorow and Ethan Zuckerman, when you let platforms operate without constraints, they don't innovate, they extract, trap your data, and fall into enshittification. So what is the strategy for Europe? Nick Snisek laid it out in episode 2. Our strategic advantage is not in pushing the trillion-dollar frontier, but in mastering diffusion and setting interoperability standards. I feel this is the strategy for anyone, anywhere in the world, not just Europe, and including America. How? Well, how do you, as an innovator or a consortium leader, actually operationalize this? Let me bring back a brilliant concept from Luke Julia. As Luke explained, AI is basically built on 3 layers. The hardware layer, I would like to point there, yeah. The cloud layer and the data layer. Right now, the hardware and cloud layers are American and Chinese monopolies. Trying to compete there is just burning billions in a rigged game. But the third layer, the data layer, which is the domain-specific, highly contextual layer, that's open for anyone. They didn't say this. I suspect that these 2 lower layers, the hardware, particularly the hardware and the cloud layer, they're becoming commodities, where the added value is in the third layer, the one that is still open for anyone. And this is exactly what Gemma calls the manufacturing layer, taking the raw gold of American LLMs and manufacturing them into safe, liability-free tools for a specific sector. So if you are building your next Horizon Europe proposal or your deep tech startup, I'm giving you just one action task. Stop pitching generic AI wrappers built on extractive US clouds. Instead, pitch contextual safety and sovereign domain expertise. And most importantly, prove that to the evaluators by replacing the traditional paper ethics, traditional chapter, replace that with a hardcore budgeted, technical compliance, and algorithmic auditing milestone. That's what Gemma does, algorithmic auditing. Show them you are taking raw AI and manufacturing it into a resilient European compliant tool that defies gravity, that flies. So in the digital transition, you don't win by being the fastest to break things. You win by building architectures that last. If we want to go deeper into economic transitions, well, uh, if you want to understand how to position your project for success, my new book, Transition Science in the Economy, is now available on Amazon. Please like, subscribe, restack, and share this episode with your consortium. And you can also take a look at the newsletter Polis Doxa. You have the QR code on screen where I dig deeper into these issues. And well, let's build projects that don't just get funded, projects that actually transform, that change the world. See you next time.